Okay, so SilentEgo, the soul of business. So today, for our listeners and viewers, I've got a very special guest, Titch Cormack, who is a special services veteran, entrepreneur, and soon to be rolling out a BBC television programme. So we've got a lot to talk about today. But I'd like to just welcome you, Titch. We've had a very fascinating morning already. We drove over here. It took us about an hour to get here, but we should have done the podcast in the car because it was fascinating learning about your journey. But today, I'd like to welcome you, and I'd like to talk to you about where it all began, really. You've got a fascinating special forces background, but equally, you're an entrepreneur. You run your own bike restoration business and cafe and events business from Pool Key, which is, I'll let you talk about that a little bit further on, but we've got so much to talk about. And then right now you're sort of on the precipice of moving into a media career. So wow, what an entrepreneur. But where did it all begin? I mean, relatively humble upbringing, parents, school teachers, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
Grandfather, I think, was a military man.
He was.
There, yeah.
So, I mean, that was my inspiration to go to the military. But certainly, I mean, I was born in Hull, and I moved across to Grimsby when I was 12, when I moved across to Grimsby. But both my parents were teachers, so certainly I wasn't of this sort of hard knocks background, they were by no means well paid, but we weren't on the breadline, I was actually all right, and certainly my parents are still together now. So I'm not one of these people who came from an hard knocks background and I was in a broken family. This was an alcoholic. No, not at all. They were great, So they were fantastic. And we moved to Grimsby, and I ended up at my dad's school, of all things. Okay, I won't go into how I ended up at my dad's school. It turned out to be a very good move for me, really, because I was sort of a bit going off the rails, etc., and it was a way of putting me over to and having a little bit more of an insight into what I was doing, which, I imagine as a kid, it was a little bit intimidating. And I don't mind saying this now, I'm sure it won't affect anything that my dad did, but my dad said to me, because he'd been brought up in Hull, he knew the score. Kids are bullies, and they're going to target me when I turned up at that school, which inevitably they did. Yeah. But he said, you've got 2 weeks. You've got 2 weeks, son. 2 weeks. You can do what you want, but if anybody starts on you, you give them it back immediately. Right. So he gave me leeway to go, right, you need to establish yourself. Right. Which was really good of him. It was fantastic. And certainly, crikey, I lost many times, but it certainly made a point with the kids at school. And from then on, it was actually quite easy. It made my school life a lot easier. But it was good. I really enjoy that time. And I'm still in touch with my schoolmates now, which is cool. Yeah. I still chat to them guys, even though I've sort of been around all the place. And I find it really interesting to go back and see the guys and chat and meet every year.
So did you follow the academic career from there? Or?
No, I didn't actually. And neither did my brother, interestingly. And now I would say one of the reasons behind that was because both my teachers were parents. I said this in the thing. Both my parents were teachers.
Yeah. Pleased about that.
Yeah. Because they were both teachers, they were really, they sort of had one goal for us in the fact that the only way to achieve and get ahead in life was to go into further education, university, etc., etc. That is how we would do it. And they were quite firm in that view. And inevitably, what happens, especially with kids, you're getting this stuff pushed out. You will do this, you will do that.
Yeah.
Both myself and my brother didn't.
Right,
we buggered off as soon as we could. Yeah, we were out. Well, no, we're not going to do that. Yeah. And certainly through my life and my experience of what I'd seen, I now don't believe, and this is nothing, no detriment to my parents at all, is that their view is not the only view.
Right.
Their view is not the only view, and I've certainly come across ways and skill sets and stuff like that are not involved with further education, that are far more influential in life and achieving things than just going down that route. But certainly, I'm not knocking education at all. I think it's absolutely fantastic and very, very valuable. But it's not the only route, and it's not the be-all and end-all of success at all.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very early on, sort of, going into that sort of conditioning, you were kind of going on a journey that you could detect within yourself quite early. You forming an independent outlook. But I think from what I've picked up, your parents put that real pillar of support in place. But in the end, obviously, as we travel from, the academic sort of journey, the schooling journey, and then moving into what is, was a big proportion of your life with special services. And dare I say, we talk about SBS and SAS. What was the story there? So you're coming out of the the schooling world, or sort of your education, and then pointing towards military. What was going on in your mind at that point? And I believe your grandfather was in the commandos. Is that right?
Marine. Yeah, he was a Marine. Yeah. He was at 4-5 Commando.
So was it in the family?
My dad wasn't and stuff like that, and it wasn't like a long-standing tradition. But my granddad, and certainly on both my mum and my dad's side, had been in the forces. My dad's dad was a Marine and was actually involved in D-Day. So he landed at Sword Beach during D-Day. And survived the Second World War, which was actually quite rare, really, when you look at the percentages of what those guys went through. And really quite an impressive guy. Unfortunately, he died when the year I was born. Really? So I was born, he was alive, but unfortunately I never really met him. He would have seen me as a little tiny creature with a full nappy, and that's unfortunately all he got to witness of me, which is a shame, because I would love to have met him and chatted to him.
Interesting.
But that was one of my inspirations to join the Marines.
Right.
That was one of the things that I wanted to do, because the relationship between my dad was, again, as I alluded to before, they were very into education. Yeah. That was the only way ahead. And I don't know whether it was just my personal feelings. I felt as if my dad didn't believe that we were going to do anything, because we weren't doing this education thing. Yeah. I wanted to go and do something
Well, I think
else.
in those days, if we go back, you were kind of classified somewhere on the social scene as, if you're not a doctor, a lawyer, or any other sort of like core professions. Or if you don't mind me saying, in those days, I think school teaching still had a really big status.
Oh, absolutely.
In the village. And you were somebody. And, in some respects, I can parallel that with my education, in the sense that we always looked up to our school teachers and headmasters, because they were the ones that were sort of, giving you the early guidance to say, to make something of yourself, son, you've got to get good grades, and, maybe go to university or consider colleges and things to make it in life. And then obviously somewhere along the line, sometimes military was a close second, was like, well, he's not very good at this stuff, he's going in the army. Yeah. As an example.
But certainly if you went officer-wise, all of a sudden, if he's going to be an officer, then that's a respectable career aspiration. Yeah. However, just as respectable as going in as an OR, which is another rank. Yeah. Why is that not a respectable journey in life? Absolutely it is. And what I found, actually, a lot of the ORs that I ended up joining with, they're actually very well educated guys. Well, sometimes they might not have the piece of paper that says, I got an A in this, I got a B in that. Yeah. But they're actually really switched on cookies. And a lot of them end up going officers anyway. Yeah. Later on, once they've got a really good basis and good bit of experience in life. I've gone officer. So, I think a lot of people back then would look at it and go, well, if he's gone officer, he's an officer and a gentleman and all that, the old Richard Gere thing, and he's not gone as a grunt on the ground. Yeah. But I wanted to go in as, a grunt on the ground. I wanted to go in as what's known as a gravel belly. That's well,
let's talk about that. I mean, so you were prepared to do that. Yeah. What was inspiring you to do that in those days?
Well, it was this relationship with my dad. Is that fact I didn't, I thought the one way to gain a lot of respect from my dad is do what his dad did. Right. Because he always spoke very highly of his dad. Right. And I thought, if I achieve this, if I become a Royal Marines commando that his dad was, then that'll change the dynamic between me and my dad. And that's what drove me into that. It did. Yeah, without a doubt. And certainly once I actually then passed out as a Royal Marine, then certainly the attitude and the dynamic between my dad changed immensely, which was great. You know, I think he thought I wouldn't do it.
Did he?
Yeah, I think he thought I was going in there and there was no way I was going to achieve it. I don't think, you know. Mind you, this is why I don't know what he thought. Didn't really speak to me much, you know what I mean? Northern dad, like, yeah, whatever, son.
Seen and not heard, son.
Yeah. That sort of thing. Yeah, but he's a great lad.
Very Victorian outlook.
Yeah.
He'll never make anything of himself.
What? He'll not do that, you know.
Comes back with the FA Cup 10 years later, you know.
So it was a bit like that, and it changed immensely once I'd done it, and the relationship was really, really good, and has been. It's just improved ever since.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I ended up spending. What did I do? I mean, there's all sorts of ins and outs into this actually, because I was in the Marines till '99, and then I put in to go outside. So let's see, how long we got? 3 hours. Okay. Yeah. So what happened was. During that time, I was up at 4-5 Commando, and I wanted to have a go at doing SF selection, so Special Forces selection.
Right.
During that time, I went to my mate's wedding over in Edinburgh, a guy called Phil. At his wedding, I fell off a building. I think I had too much to drink. I had done. I fell off a building, landed on metal railings, punctured my lung, smashed my ribs, punctured my lung. Wow. Good little anecdote here, actually. This is great. You know, guy called Shane. If you listen to this, Shane, you did that. He knows he did this because we laugh about it. So Shane was there, and he pulled me off the railings. And put me down on the floor. Obviously, we had a few beers. I'd sobered up in a millisecond.
Wow.
Because I was like, I'm done here. And he laid me on the floor, and my lungs were filled up with blood. But he was still absolutely drunk as a skunk. And here he is, like, and I remember, I'll never forget it. He says to me, "We'll sleep here, and it'll all be all right in the morning." You know, and I'm like, and inside I'm thinking, "No, mate, no." And I'm trying to say ambulance, but I'm really struggling to speak.
Yeah.
I'm going, ambulance. So he realised there was something wrong with me when this blood's coming out of my mouth, and he phones a taxi. As you do, I'll get a taxi. So he got a taxi, and the taxi driver rocked up, saw me, immediately was like, ambulance.
Yeah.
Called an ambulance.
Wow.
The ambulance turns up, and they get me into the back of the ambulance, take me straight to the A&E in Edinburgh. And Shane accompanies me there, and in the ambulance, and we arrived there, and I'm straight into surgery. Because what's happened is I landed between, because I was such a skinny little individual back then, that I'd landed between, the spikes were about that far apart, and I'd landed between them. I've got a little hole in my back where one of them went in my back, the other one went in front of me. But the bar between hit me in the ribs, broke my ribs, and my ribs went through my lung.
Wow.
So that's what had happened. So all these were all bunched up here. I was straight into surgery. They did all that. I've got a nice little scar here where they went in and put a tube in.
So this is like chapter 1 of The Bionic Man.
Yeah, this is where, Oh, no, I had another one before there. That's when I had my head rebuilt, but that's a different story.
Wow.
I got my face. It's a beauty, that. They did a real good job on it. Made me look better looking on that side. Yeah, that's the good side. They made that. Yeah. There we are. I'm in straight into surgery. Shane, in his wisdom and his drunken stupor, decides he's going to get in touch with my mum, because he knew my mum and dad. He'd stayed at my place multiple times, and he rang my mum and dad. And then the next bit of the story I get from my mum, because she said, I'll never forget it. I remember the phone. It was about 3 or 4 in the morning, and the phone rings, and I answered the phone. I'm like, hello, and he said, Pat, it's Shane. And as soon as she was like, 4 o'clock. What is it? He said, it's Titch. He's probably dead.
Wow.
Things that your mum don't want to hear at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
This had been overheard by one of the nurses who took the phone off him. We're like, no, he's not. He's in surgery. This has been an accident. But my mum said, my heart just sank. And I'm like, Bill, that's been our Bill.
Yes.
Waking him up, that crikey. No, the nurse then sorted it all out. But yeah, Shane. Cracking lad, by the way. But things your mum don't want to hear.
Yeah.
As it was, they sorted it all out, and I was out for a little while with that. Probably about 6 months to a year, really, to get right after that. But this was what affected me joining the SF, in certain ways, because what I wanted to do was join SBS. Now, back then...
So you were a Marine.
I was a Marine. I wanted to go SBS.
And you're saying, right, I want to go a bit further than this.
Yeah.
You know,
I want to go.
yeah.
I want to go next level. So I want to join SBS. And unfortunately, then they didn't have what was called non-dive billets. So everybody who joined the SBS had to be a diver.
Because SBS has got, because there's this kind of like thing about the SBS and the SAS, isn't there? That sort of.
It's the difference between the two, isn't it?
Yeah, because you hear a lot about
Yeah.
the SBS, and so obviously for our sort of listeners today, defining that would be quite useful.
Right. So they're very, very similar. So similar in the fact that the selection process is the same and it's joint now. So it's actually a combined selection process. Right. So if you go SBS or you want to go SAS, it's all done in one thing. So SAS and SBS all train together. Right. All the way to the end of selection, which is the traditional selection process, which is it's about 6-8 months to do that whole selection process. And then once you get to the end of it, SAS are badged up in Hereford, and then SBS have continuation training. So we actually have a longer selection process. We go into dive course and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So we get the badge SBS, and then you go into your dive course, your boat course, mobility and stuff like that. So
is there a decision there at that point, sort of Marine, yeah?
Yeah.
SBS, SAS.
Yeah.
How does that sort of...
It's, do you know, interesting, the dynamic in there is... what's the percentages now? I think it's about 60% of UK Special Forces are ex-Marines, right, which is a vast chunk. Yeah. And the other 40% is made up of the other services. So a lot of parachute regiment guys and various other cat badges that then go into it. But actually a huge chunk. I mean, don't quote me on 60%. There'll be lots of people out there, forces guys, it's not 60%, it's 58.2. But that's, you know, it is one of those things. I know it's a big chunk actually are ex-Marines, and that's both Hereford and Paul. So a lot of guys come from the Marine background. So
you decided to focus on challenging getting into selection for SBS.
That's where I wanted to go. And this was this is when I was a young lad. So I was obviously fit as a fiddle. Not that I am now, he says. So yeah,
I'm not so sure. I've seen you working out in the gym. Yeah.
You know, I try, mate. I'm a tryer.
Oh, I'll tell you what. You should be in a circus. The stuff you do.
So there I was back in those days at 4-5 Commando, young lad, wanted to go selection, and I put in for SBS, but they didn't have non-dive billets. So when I say non-dive billets, everybody had to be a diver. In order to dive, it's a very stringent medical process that they check everything on you. I punctured my lung. And because of the damage in my lung, I wasn't eligible as a diver. So I couldn't go SBS. Now, they've changed the policy and stuff now, which I'll come on to in a little while. And it just totally makes sense for what they did. However, so the only other option was for me was for SF to go SAS. Now, back in the day, because the two selection processes were separate, in order to apply as a Royal Marine to go SAS, you had to, there was a waiting time for it. So you could apply for it, but they only let so many a year go for selection for SAS. Yeah. Now I applied for it, and there was a 2-year waiting term for me to be able to then go for selection. So I actually put my chit in and left.
Right.
So I left the Marines. Yeah.
Wow.
In 99. And Shane did it all at the same time.
Right.
So me and Shane both left at the same time. So I left and I went outside. Worked for my brother for a little while. Actually applied to go and join the Aussie Commandos. So I went to go apply to join the Aussie Commandos. Unfortunately, that all fell through. It all fell through for a long, convoluted thing, but it transpired that my medical documents had gone missing and stuff like this. Right. And they wouldn't take me into the Australian forces without any medical history and all this sort of. Anyway, that fell through. I actually went then to join the Paras. Right. So I thought my only option, because I can't dive, is to go parachute regiment and then go SAS. That was
That's
then
the route.
But it was okay. That avenue's been been blocked. right, how else can I do this? Where can I go around? Right, I go and join the paras now, and I go SAS, so I get my opportunity again. So all that was just another little negotiation, reroute, but still the same goal: go and join SAS. So I went for the parachute regiment. Interestingly, the guy. So there's always a pre-course for these sort of things before you go into P company, as it were. So I went for that, and the guy running their pre-course was actually a guy I'd been on my JWIs with. So that's a jungle warfare instructor's course, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Joining the paras, mate." And he was like, "Oh, nice one, brilliant." So I went through that, monstered that little process, and I was due to join depot on the Tuesday. I can't remember the exact date, but I was joined depot on the Tuesday. I played football for a local side on the Sunday, and that's when I snapped my ACL.
Right, okay.
Guy tackled me, football boot straight to my kneecap, snapped my ACL.
Wow.
Buggers.
So that held that process up.
So there I was. I still turned up the depot with a big cast on my leg and crutches. And they were like, "What's going on?" Right, I've snapped the ACL, etc. Right. They said, "Unfortunately, you won't be able to parachute jump on that for a year plus," because I had to have an ACL reconstruction and stuff like that. That was it. So that was another avenue. Kiboshed.
Right.
Damn it. What do I do now? So now I've got to find another route to do. Only other option, let's rejoin the Marines. Let's do this. So I went back, cap in hand. "Can I come back in, please?" Yeah. And they let me, and I came back in, rejoined the Royal Marines, at which time the process had changed. They'd actually then amalgamated the selection process. So it was SAS and SBS all together.
Fantastic. So you got
brilliant.
Yeah.
So I've got another opportunity to get in through the Marines, and I could then just apply directly for SAS.
Yeah.
However, during this time, also, this is when Iraq happened and stuff like that. So this was when we landed in on Iraq. I was with 40 Commando at the time then. So Charlie Company, 40 Commando. And we landed in Al 4 and took the Meter Multering station where the big oil platforms and stuff, where they dealt with the oil, took them out. That was an interesting time, to be honest. That was the first time, really, any of those individuals had been involved in actual conflict.
Right.
Because previously, we'd had Northern Ireland and done Northern Ireland tours and stuff like that, but it wasn't very kinetic. By kinetic, I mean bullets flying and all that sort of shenanigans.
And it was.
So there we are, a young bunch of lads, a lot of us very experienced in exercise format and stuff like that, but we'd never had full-on kinetic contacts and bullets coming both ways and stuff like that. First time I've ever done it. Wow. And there we are, and the biggest helicopter assault ever to have been done. I mean, that was amazing. Yeah. Walking out there, boarding on those helicopters, and I'm talking hundreds of helicopters turning and burning into the helicopters and lifting and then flying across the border from Kuwait into Iraq. And I remember, because you're all stood up in the back, you're not sat down, we're all stood up, ready to go, and just looking out those windows, and just the sky is just a sea of helicopters, everyone flying in.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing.
Adrenaline pumping there.
Yeah. That was an amazing.
And this is Marines, right?
This is Marines. This this has been recorded selection. So I was a Marine when we first went into Iraq.
and then you're moving from that into.
Incidentally, I must mention this. And my section commander at the time was a guy called Lee Spencer, or Frank Spencer as we know him, which people may know him as the Roman Marine.
Right.
The guy who currently has the world record for rowing across the Atlantic.
Yes.
The world record, even though he's only got one leg. Wow. So yeah, he was my section commander, was Frank. Yeah, cracking lad. So yeah, we did that, and then after all that was all done and dusted, I returned back to the UK, and it was at that point in time I was like, right, now was my time to go for selection. I really want to have a crack at this. Yeah. So I put in for selection, and I got through. And it's interesting. I'd like to chat about that, and we'll look at that as a process and what it's designed to achieve. Certainly, I don't want to cross any lines with what they are doing, but what it's designed to achieve and what they're looking for, because it's not necessarily what people would think they're they're looking for, you know. So people look at it and they see it as a very physical aspect. They're expecting to see these huge 6'4" muscle behemoth individuals. You know, this is not. It's not the reality of it. Not at all. You'll find a lot of the guys vary in shapes and sizes all over the place. You know, you've got little tiny skinny whippersnappers. You've got huge guys. I've worked with some enormous guys. It's actually not an advantage to be that big. To be honest, you don't want to be that big. Imagine trying to get through little doorways and stuff like that when you've got all this kit on, and you're 6'4" and weigh 20 stone. Not easy. Get your little whippersnapper through there. We're good to go. But the majority of guys are in the middle. You also get some guys that you wouldn't think are in there at all, who might be a little bit chubby, a little bit chunky, and you think, really, yeah. Because I've seen guys go through that process.
So it's like having an open mind about all of this, isn't it? If you think about it, it's sort of. There are so many, well, what you're highlighting, and there's myths. People have these sort of like non-supportive views of certain people in certain professions, and you're looking at, you know, that. But what I'm picking up from yourself, Titch, is this sort of relentless pursuit of focus. Yeah. You know, I knew where I wanted to be. Whether I knew it or not, I knew where I wanted to be. Yeah. So you've gone from Marines into, you know, now into the selection process of the SBS, and, you know, you sort of, you know, you're kind of up against the big boys and all the rest of it, but what you're really trying to articulate is not about the physicality of it. It's a part of it, but it's is it the mindset? Yeah. Is it that sort of...
And I would say it's 90% mental resilience. It's mental resilience and mindset. Yeah. I went into that process knowing that I was either going to pass or they were going to fail me. Right. I would never fail myself. Right. And that's a huge part of it. As people might have seen on the TV thing, you know, which is loosely based on I say massively loosely based on this the selection process. They use a certain few little aspects of it, but it is, you see so many people what they call VW, voluntary withdrawal. So they put their hand up. I can't go on. So they fail themselves inevitably. They've mentally given up. It's not that their body's given up. They mentally have resign themselves to the fact that they're not good enough. And people, and you can see this process, they sow the seeds of this. This is what they do in part of the selection. They want to sow the seeds of this self-doubt. They will sow the seeds of it. They'll encourage that. Not by screaming and shouting as you've seen on the TV. This is not how it works. No. It's far more subtle than that. Far more subtle than that. Yeah. They ain't screaming, shouting.
So do you kind of like, you feel that you have to dig deep when you're in them sort of situations? You sort of, is it a mind thing? Is it a heart thing? Is it a gut thing? Is it an unknown thing? It's
I think it's a resolve. It's an absolute mental and physical resolve. As I said, I went in there with the attitude, I will pass this, or they will fail me. If they turn around and say, I'm not good enough, fair play. But at no point in time will I ever give up. Right. And that is each and every individual who's passed that course will never, ever give up. Imagine how formidable that is if you're a person going against this group of guys. Yeah. A small group of guys, that driven and that professional and relentless that they will not stop, that's very hard to combat. Yeah. Very hard to combat.
Because I know we were talking coming over here today to roll this out, which I found fascinating about, well, firstly, the resilience, the mental aspects of it. Yeah, you've got the physical side of it, but it's that plan A piece. That bit really fascinated me. Yeah. There isn't a plan B. You know, that's how I registered it. It was sort of, we knew the objective. So I'm thinking, you know, as I've got to know you over the last little while, that this is running right through the core of the military, the SBS, which I know there's a few sort of like some conditioning thinking there about resilience and never giving up and the like of it. But it's that plan A piece. Yeah. If you want something badly enough, whether it's military or in life, it's that relentless pursuit to overcome whatever you need to overcome to get where you need to be.
Yeah,
and I'm seeing that in your current, you know, your bike business as well, because obviously you're on the TV and, you know, that aspect of it is that you look at.
I mean, the TV was never a plan A, by the way.
Oh no.
That happened to be a plan X that they just threw in.
But that's an A plus now, isn't it?
Exactly,
that's
an
A plus.
A plus.
Yeah, we're going upwards, not backwards. You know, which is cool. So,
but certainly, as we chatted about before, is that I've always been a big believer in there is plan A, there is no plan B. Plan B is a secondary option. That's a secondary option. That gives you an escape. Right. That gives you an option to go for a lower level. Yeah. If you don't have a plan B, there is only plan A. I am going to achieve plan A. However that happens, I will make it happen. And probably as I spoke about when I wanted to do selection. Yes. I wanted to do selection, punctured lung, can't go selection. I'm in the Marines. What's my option? I come outside. I apply for the Australians because my opportunity to join Aussie SAS was there. Unfortunately, that failed, whereas my other option, join the Paras, go SAS. Yeah. All I'm going is plan A. It's how I'm going to do this. And you will fall down and things will get put in your way. But how do I do this? Right, okay, Paras, not an option, snapped ACL. What do? Go back to the Marines. It's now joint. Now I'm going to go SBS if I can do this. Yeah. And we'll go, and I'll go SBS. But so it's always going for plan A. That's all I'm doing. You get knocked back. Yeah, you get knocked back. Keep going, keep pushing forward. Because if you give yourself a plan B, all right, okay, well, plan B is I just have a good career in the Marines. Yeah. That gives me the option to give up. And that is what I will not do in any aspect of anything. Don't give yourself the option to give up. Keep pushing on that drive for plan A. Yeah.
And I think that's key for our listeners and viewers today, that you know, we talk about, you know, in employment, the world of work. We talk about the youth of today. You know, we touched on this coming over today about military service being a good thing. You know, in some respects for you know, grounding you to be, you know, a good human being, and you know, having that relentless pursuit of whatever you set your mind on. Yeah. And you're obviously testament to that. You know, physically set back, mentally overcome it, get going. It's quite easy just to say, well, you know what, I'll go and do something else completely. Yeah. But there's that sort of almost like that innate pursuit of getting where you need to be. And, you know, you're obviously testimony to that. So, because you were how many years in the SBS? I mean,
10 years.
10 years. I mean, and you saw a lot of action as well. And, you know, which I know we're not going to go into too much detail about, but it's kind of shaped you, hasn't it, in so many different ways?
Yeah, without a doubt. I learned a lot. But through all this process, what you do is you learn a lot about yourself as well. You learn a lot about what you can achieve when you're under the cosh. Right. And inevitably, a lot of the guys are like that as well. Is my best work comes out when it is absolutely balls to the wall.
Really?
And it is on. And when it's all falling apart around you, that's when I start. And that's the way I tend to work. When people start falling by the wayside, I'm still just ticking along. Falling by the wayside. Once they start falling by the wayside, it starts really upping. That's when I start getting ahead of the head of my game, and I'm really starting bringing.
A lot of people sort of talk a lot about in life, in business and things, particularly about, you know, sort of when you're pursuing something with a passion, you can quite easily form like a flow. Yeah. So almost like there's a slow motion going on, and you're just like, it's almost like you've trained for it. Yeah. And everything's running in harmony.
It's a bit like if you ever listen to the guys who race motorcycles. Right. You know, your Guy Martins and Pete Hickman and stuff like that. I was chatting away with Pete Hickman, one of the TT riders, and how he gets into the flow of things. So for him, riding a bike. He's riding a bike. He's coasting along doing his thing. He only comes into his element when it tips over 140, 150 mile an hour. Wow. When he's absolutely on it. I think Peter Hickman still has the lap record for the Ironman TT. I mean, I think he's like averaging something like 136 miles an hour. I think it is. Average. Do you know what I mean? Bearing in mind some of those corners, he has to slow down to about 10 mile an hour for the hairpin, come back and around. Yeah. But he averages 136 miles an hour. I mean, that's immense. But it's that ability. But when it says when that happens, when it's elevated to that level, all of a sudden it all just goes slow. Yeah. Slows down and you're just in the zone.
I mean, you know what I found, Titch, coming over here today, that the stories are endless. You know, but if we could sort of, you know, just highlight the sort of the dynamics of SBS. You know, if we could just spend just
Yeah,
5 minutes on that, just rattling through what that really does to you and where you got to. Because I know you ended up in sort of mobility.
Yeah.
You know, and it's actually led us on to where you are now with your bike business and how that was a hobby and you've turned that. You know.
What we didn't go, which as you said, viewers might be interested in, is the dynamics, the difference between the two.
Yes.
And actually, there isn't.
Right.
There isn't that much of a difference.
So that's a myth.
Our selection process is the same.
Yeah.
Absolutely the same. We then go this way for SBS, so we do boat and dive courses, and then Hereford go SAS. Now people are like, well, SBS boats, so they just bob around on boats. Yeah, but they're called SAS. They don't spend Special Air Service. They don't spend all their time floating around in the sky. Actually, what they are is their ways and means of getting to a target to achieve what you need to do. So we can use boats, etc., etc. We use vehicles. Talk about mobility. So most of my jobs were all mobility. So I was in vehicles doing all sorts, helicopters, the dive piece, all that sort of thing. We do parachute as well. Hereford parachute and do all that. So they're actually really, really similar. And all it is a way of getting to target. And I would say 98% of my career in the SBS was on the land. Really? 2% of it, I might have been under the water or I might have been on top of the water. That's it. Rest of it, land-based ops. So actually, the two outfits are pretty much identical, you know. So I think people would be like, really? Well, I thought they were water and they were land. No, not at all. Yeah, I couldn't be more wrong. Very much land-based operations. So that's what it is.
And do you feel that sort of, for as much as this is sort of like individual eliteness, that there is this team thing that is... You know, if you're looking at communication and, you know, getting along together. So, you know, without going into detail, you're on a mission, but it is so important that you're working as a unit and as a team when you're going into
that's a huge aspect. When we were talking about the selection.
Talked about communication, didn't we? You know.
Absolutely. That one of the big things they're looking for in the selection process is they're looking for people that will work really well together. You know, a good bloke, a decent character who gets on with people who can make things work as a team. There's no point in being this absolute ultimate soldier if, for want of a better phrase, you're an absolute arsehole. You know, it's you're not going to gel. You know, and I'd seen examples of that of people going through who are just fantastic soldiers, but a bit of a dick, and they're like, nah, he's not coming in. So the guys work really, really well together. And one thing we spoke about before this was when I'd mentioned about education is not the be all and end all of it. Right. In the fact that I worked alongside people, some that had 2 degrees. Well, but certainly one guy who had 2 degrees, multilinguist. Speak Mandarin, Russian, etc. You know, fantastically educated. To the point where we called him C3PO because he was the translation bot. I mean, an amazing guy, but absolutely banging as well. And another guy who had absolutely very little qualifications, however, but was not unintelligent because he didn't have this piece of paper. A real switched-on individual, and came from up north on the west coast. And anybody from up there, you would assume was uneducated, wouldn't you, Paul?
That's right. No. Well, you would actually, and we're proud of it.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to remember the northeast is full of men. You know, where the men are men and the women are men.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly. But it was really interesting to see that dynamic of a guy who's come through the university and been very highly educated to a guy who didn't at all and went straight into work when he finished. But they ended up working, and not this, they both ended up working at this same level. They're very, very high end. And to see those guys working in the same team, both of those guys had very mutual respect for each other and worked alongside each other. It was fantastic to see that. And it was a really good example of the fact that education is very good. However, it is not the only route.
And I think the point you made really well was that multi sort of like level communicator.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about being able to motivate and drive people at one level, but also get through. And I know you talk about Operation Cobra and presenting to David Cameron and, you know, things like that in the time. And, you know, interesting dynamic that, isn't it?
Yes, certainly. That is a huge, huge skill set. Yeah. The ability to be able to, if you were, say, let's put it in terms of a factory. What I believe is an invaluable skill set is the ability to speak to the guy on the shop floor. That's the guy who's doing the process. He needs to understand and be spoken to in his language. That's the big thing in his language of how the process is going to work and what we need to achieve and how we do it. The other thing you need to do is then be able to put this across the middle management. Yeah, middle management. This is when you're up in the ante. You're then changing your grammar and your body language and be able to present what you've just been talking to your man on the shop floor. You're then putting it across. This is how we're going to do exactly that process, but it's the next level up. But you've also got to be prepared to then go to the CEO. Okay, that's great. I like what you're going to do here. That's brilliant. But I need you to speak to the CEO, the boss. And then you need to be able to put it up to another higher level. And if you can present well and speak to people, and this is all about the communication and body language and your grammar, and putting it across to this level, and the guy at the bottom, and make it all work. That is
so lots of emotional
intelligence,
physical intelligence, how you turn up, how you present yourself, how you communicate, invaluable skills in obviously the SPS, well, dare we say it, the selection process. Yeah. They're looking for this stuff as well.
They're looking for people to be able to do that sort of thing. Yeah. And unfortunately, a piece of paper that says I've got an A in this or a distinction in this and a distinction in that does not create that skill set. Yeah. It doesn't. Life and interaction creates that skill set. And unfortunately, what we're seeing in the modern day process is that is getting watered down. It's not happening because everyone's communicating through electronic devices.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And we spoke about this one, certainly, is that the way I like to do business is speak to people.
Yeah.
And it used to really frustrate me when we'd be like, right, okay, we need to book this and get this sorted. And they'd be like, right, send it in an email to that department. Well, that department's only 100 metres over there. I'm going to go down there. I'm going to speak to the guy who runs that department. And we'll chat directly. He'll write it down on a piece of paper. He knows what he's got to do and he's going to action it then. Rather than it sitting in his email queue and it not happening and it getting put to the back and things don't happen.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because coming from that sort of team, close-knit sort of human dynamic, representing your country at the high, at an elite level to sort of, stop the bad guys, let's call it that, and being trained and conditioned to sort of apply that. It comes back to that human dynamic, no matter what you say. I mean, I know you're technically superior with, arms and things like that and all the rest of it, but if you're looking at from a management leadership perspective, it comes back to that dialogue. And then if you couple that with that real soul of energy and drive and purpose, plan A, I'm working towards achieving this in life, then these are all skills that a lot of people kind of ignore because they attach themselves. They think, well, I need to be this before I can be that. Yeah. Where what you're saying is, actually, you just got to have an application to want to do it and configure your brain to make it happen and stay resilient on the journey and never give up. I mean, that's, every sort of motivational speech in the history of the world. But I think this is practiced in the most comprehensive capacity in military forces, from an elite perspective. But it comes down to that team thing, human dynamic. And then, we talked about that sort of disconnect when you're coming away from that environment into, pardon the language, I know it's Civvy Street and all the rest of it, but how the rest of the world works. And I know that we touched on this an hour or so ago about where it was difficult, because you're used to sort of communicating with people to just get things done, whereas in kind of, dare I say it, the real world, so to speak,
it doesn't, and
it doesn't happen.
Certainly, I remember I said that I was spoiled.
Yeah,
I was spoiled and wrapped in cotton wool in a way, and you think, well, Special Forces spoiled, wrapped in cotton wool. No. I was spoiled because of the people around me. Yeah. Because of those brilliant individuals who've been through that same process, and we'd worked together under very, very high pressure situations, and succeeded. And the reason they succeeded is because guys I'm sorry you don't mind me swearing, get shit done. Yeah. They get shit done. And this was the big thing that I had in there. And this is why I was spoiled, was because I would ask guys to do something. Right, I need those weapons sorted and getting them loaded up. Bang, it gets done. He's back to me 10 minutes later, That's all loaded up, Titch. What else? I need the dive sets prepping. I need that prepping and stuff like that. Joe, can you square away the climb kit? Cool. That's all getting done. When they finish that job, they're back to me. That's done. What else do we need? And brilliant, and you just achieve so much when people are like that, driven and want to do it.
So obviously fascinating journey so far with, obviously SBS and all the sort of, the selection process where it got you, and the kind of the mindset is very interesting. What I've got for this is plan A, right through from, being a even when you were at school, there's this plan A coming around and this relentless pursuit, and how you kind of used to sort of that plan A, which is a very human thing. And working with some really smart people, some quite forgiving people as well. We've got this perception about the elite special forces being all big hard brutes, but at the end of the day, you're not. You've got this mental attitude that is all about this relentless pursuit to achieve the outcome, which is what you train for. It's obvious. But then there's that kind of shock, isn't there, when you come away from that environment into what is commonly known as Civvy Street, but, where you're used to sort of getting things done on time. It's just common practice. It's who we are, what we do, what we believe in, and what we sign up for. Now we're in the real world, and, it'd be interesting because, in some respects, you're transitioning away from, the kind of the elite military background into SBOM, and how you're forming that, and but it'd be interesting just to explore a little bit more on that.
I mean, well, first I suppose, how did SBOM come about? And how I ended up going from UK Special Forces to being a motorcycle mechanic. But how it was I did it as a hobby anyway. That was my thing. So. It was a thing that I did outside of my work, and it was what I enjoyed doing. So riding the bikes and doing my own bike maintenance and making my own.
This has been the forces.
Yeah. So I'm in the military, and it's a very busy lifestyle. You're away. You're flying around all over the world doing all sorts of stuff. But in those little fleeting moments that I was back for a weekend and stuff, I'd be looking, where can I race? Where's the nearest race that I can do? Can I get in there? And inevitably there would be one somewhere, and I'd be out on the bike and I'd be giving it the beans around the track. And that's what I was doing. And when I came back, I would do all the maintenance on the bikes. I also built a few little bikes of my own when I was in there. So it was a hobby. But I knew I really enjoyed it, and I thought, right, if I can make this hobby a breadwinner, can I make this a living? Yeah, I can. If I set this as my plan A, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to achieve, I'll make it work. And I put the same drive and ethos that I did to get myself through the SF selection, join the Marines, through the Marines selection, through SF selection, through all that, put that same effort into it, I can make it work.
It's interesting that, picking up on it, because obviously when you're serving in the SBS, you're in the sort of transport corps, if that's what it's called.
I mean, I'd take a massive offence to that, but that's okay. No.
Yeah, but
in the transport corps.
But you know what I'm trying to say.
It's
that bit. So there is a bit of a passion there as well, isn't there? So you were doing something you enjoyed.
I was actually singled out for going into it. So I can talk about this. So in the SBS and similarly with the SAS, you have several different troops in a squadron. Yeah. So there'll be a mobility troop, there'll be a boats troop, an air troop, so that's your parachuting guys, and a mountain troop. So those are specialities. So you specialise in those things. There's also those things you specialise in as well. But within there, there's those small groups. However, we all specialise in doing the actual door kicking, the job, the assault on the buildings, the takedown of an oil rig or whatever it may be. We train all in that aspect. Yeah. But if the way of getting to that target might be by boat, then that's where boat team, they take the lead on it. Mm-hmm. If the way of getting to the target in whether it be Iraq, Afghanistan, where any other part of the world is by vehicle, then mobility will take the lead on it.
And that's where you were?
That's where I was in mobility, and I was singled out for that because I used to ride and race bikes and stuff like that, and they were like, we want him in mobility. He's all over it. Let's get him in mobility because he's already got half that skill set.
So you're having fun as well?
Oh, yeah, I was loving it, mate. Yeah, it's brilliant. Round peg, round hole, wasn't it? You know what I mean? And they were like, yep, let's get him in there. And I'm like, sweet. You know, I think I'd have hated it if I was like a mountain troop and I was hanging off a cliff disco legging.
Yeah.
You know, at 30 feet with loads of kit hanging off me. But those lads love doing that sort of business, you know, that's their bag. So
specialising in that particular area.
In that, so it was something that I enjoyed, and it was part of my life anyway. So to take that and then put it into a business was what I really wanted to do. I didn't want to, as much as people do often, and pigeonhole myself into the fact that all I can do is security. So many people, and I'm not just talking SF, I'm talking military in general. So from any aspect, men or women who come out of those services think, well, all I can do is that one little skill set. I can go into, I can do security or do whatever, and they pigeonhole themselves into the skill set that they learn in the forces, and that's not true. You're absolutely categorically wrong. You can do anything you want. And certainly I've spoken to people before, as I put you about in the car, guys who have done other things. One of the guys was absolutely passionate about cycling, road cycling. And I'd spoken to him about when he left, what he was going to do. And he said, I don't know, talking about security and stuff. And I was like, mate, dude, you still biking? Yeah, I'm still biking. So I showed him another establishment who made this lovely little bike cafe, bike thing that is really successful, does very, very well. So I was like, what about doing that? If you take that and transport it to where you are, is there anything like that? No. Have a look at that, mate, and seriously consider doing that, because then you're doing something that you love anyway, and you put the same amount of drive into it, you'll make it work. And he's like, yeah, I get it. So that's what I did, was took my passion and say, right, okay, I want to make this into a business. By hook, by crook, this is plan A, and that is what I'm going to do. So, yes, there's been some lovely, lucky little finds on the way, like finding the location. But again, who you know, not what you know. That was the social skills, the ability to be able to speak to lots of people, have your fingers in pies, and have the opportunity to go, oh yeah, I've heard there's something to rent down there. Is there? Who owns that? Okay, it's this guy. Speak to this guy. Okay. Hello, I'm doing that. And it's putting yourself out there and putting yourself in the position to have the opportunity. Yeah. It's not just waiting for something to come to you.
Well, this is it, isn't it? It's making it happen.
Yeah.
And this is the sort of core message to, our listeners and viewers today, is that, if you've got something in your heart, your plan A, and you're not implementing your plan A, you're shortchanging yourself in life. Yeah. And what it's very clear that all of those sort of skills that you developed were wrapping up with that hobby, which was, where your heart really was as well. So you had that sort of, it was all very transferable. But it comes down to humans again. Yeah. Communication, getting on with people, being able to adapt and making it happen. Not settling for this elusive plan B. Well, maybe it might not happen.
Yeah, in which case then, I can always just go in and do some security.
Yeah, which is what you're talking about with the security. Well, It wasn't an option for you.
No, didn't actually have it at all. Oh, I have done a little bit of security, by the way, but that's because people have offered me and it's been a good job.
Yeah.
I managed to get to run
which is a nice blend, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's not your sole thing.
Cheryl Crow, the country singer.
Did you?
Yeah, I looked after her one time, which was great. Well, they asked me to do that. Go on in. Yeah, why not? Why wouldn't I? So that, I've done a little bit of that, but it's only because it's my choice, because it was actually an interesting job. There's no way I'm crawling around in sandy ditches anymore, because I've done a lot of that. Yeah, it doesn't really flick my switch doing that.
No.
Rubbish, it was.
No.
I certainly pick and choose. So that skill set's always there to be able to just go, oh, right, could you, do you fancy doing this?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I would do that,
Yeah.
So that's fine. So I still have that, but certainly that was not not something that I wanted to.
So S-Bomb came about, connections. I mean, you're in a fabulous location, aren't you?
Oh, it's great.
Okay, you couldn't get it any better.
I mean, that place was an absolute tip when I got in there. But when I got in there, it was an absolute mess. And I opened up the roller shutter. I'd not rented it. Obviously, I went to have a look at it. Opened up the roller shutter, and I just looked inside, and I was like, wow. The place was a derelict. Big holes in the roof, full of water, rubble, all sorts of guff in there. However, be able to see beyond that and go, hang on a minute, look at this location, right on the waterfront, beautiful, nearly 200-year-old building that is. And little did I know, wonderfully, behind a load of panelling and stuff like that, there was this lovely cast iron arched window on the front, which is absolutely stunning, that thing. But it was all bricked up and everything inside. And I just thought, yeah, we can do this.
Yeah. So you had a vision.
Yeah,
so you
absolutely.
rolled the shutters up.
Yeah.
Went, got a vision on this
I can do this. And
Yeah.
I've got, this is where plan A forms. This is what
Yeah.
I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And this is what I'll achieve. So I set myself to work there, and I remember actually looking back on, because I did a little video log thing, when I look back on it, and foolishly I put it out there, I'm going to do this in, I reckon I'm going to give myself a month.
Yeah.
An idiot. No, it wasn't a month. It actually took me about 8 months.
Yeah.
But I was grafting, mate. You know, a lot of the time I was doing 48 hours, get some sleep, 48 hours.
Really, round the clock?
Yeah.
So
I'd work through
applying
the
your
night.
skills as well
Yeah,
from the...
because I got a lot done in the evenings.
Yeah.
You know, when it's absolutely deathly quiet, I would literally work 48 hours and then have a sleep, and then 48 hours and have a sleep. You know, I was doing everything in there. I had a lot of help, though, for things like
So
my brother coming down.
you were on a mission.
I was on a mission, yeah. I was on it, and I was just going to keep pushing on until I achieved it. And it took a lot longer than expected. Sure. But quite often these things do, you know. But there's no harm in a little bit of ambition and saying, you know, I'm going to set myself a time frame of this, and that's what I'm going to go for. However, if you've never done something before, it might take you a little bit longer. But the key thing there is don't just give up on it because it doesn't seem to be appearing as quick as you wanted. It might be a slow burn.
So tell our audience, our listeners today, a little bit about, you know, the facility that you have at Pilkin, what you do and what it's about, because it's multifaceted in many ways, isn't it?
It is. I mean, and that's a key thing that helps the business work, actually.
Right.
Because initially when I first started out, I did the frontage, and that's a cafe. Yeah. Okay. And actually the whole thing changed day one. I mean, oddly enough, right? So I set it up, and I put this like temporary bar in. And some coffee machines, and my plan was it was going to be on an honesty box basis.
Right.
So I was going to be in the workshop at the back doing my stuff so I could get on with the bike builds and all that sort of thing. And it would be an honesty box basis with coffee machines. I had a big idiot's guide done on the coffee machines about how to operate it, so people could operate these and just put in £2 or whatever for a coffee.
It's nice.
Yeah. However, as soon as it opened, we had a function. You know, and this is how all the functions work, because there's a bar there, and we do live music events. When it wasn't COVID and all that, so that would work really well as with the bar. But the bar ended up staying in because people said we really like the bar in here and getting served a coffee. So I made a rod for my own back then, really, didn't I? You know what I mean? All of a sudden I became a barista. Again, in the loosest of terms, barista, knocking out coffees. And serving people coffees, and people really liked it, and we utilised the bar for the functions. So we do all sorts of things, birthdays, we've done a wedding there.
Because online, when you look at it, it looks like a culture, a club.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's not like a biker's club or anything like that. It's multifaceted, isn't it? But it's got a nice feel to it.
It's people like, do you know, I'll never forget it when I first took my mum down there. So I've been building this thing for ages, and I just got open, and my mum had never seen it. She'd come down from Grimsby, and she walked in there, and I could see by the look on her face she was expecting to walk into like a Starbucks or something. You know what I mean? I've always done this coffee shop thing. I walked into it, and she was looking around like that. And I thought, what do you reckon, ma'am? And she was like, are you not going to paint that rusty tin? No, I'm not going to paint it, ma'am. Not going to paint it. It's going to stay rusty. It's going to stay rusty. Oh, right, okay. But after a couple of days, she turned around to me and goes, I get it now. Yeah. I get it. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to be like this.
So do you think you're quite artistic with all of this?
Do you know what? Oddly, I found that a lot of the guys from my old work are a bit. And it sounds a bit odd that, you know, you think, no, because everyone's got this sort of ridiculous caricature idea of an SF operator that is this gnarly dealer of death and destruction and stuff like that, and who would think he'd ever put a paintbrush in his hand and paint a nice countryside scene. But interestingly, I've working with one of the guys who's a brilliant painter. Right. A lot of musicians as well. Yeah. A lot of musicians. One of the guys a few years back left to play in a band. Wow. Yeah. So I've been doing UKSF operator and left to play in a band. Superb guitarist. Yeah, but you wouldn't have thought that these people do, but they do. Yeah. They have all sorts of little underlying secret skills that you don't know about. Yeah.
It's interesting. So, like, you know, the theme of all of this is like everything's possible once you apply Plan A. Yeah. You know, and you stick to it. So, identify, define, and implement Plan A. And there isn't a Plan B when you've got a Plan A. Yeah. And it's that sort of ruthless pursuit of making it happen for yourself to express things. So I think SBROM's got this kind of really nice feel to it of what you're doing. You're restoring bikes and, you know, bespoke builds and things, and kind of you've got your entertainment elements, so very entrepreneurial. You know,
it's all, I mean, it was all very much sort of suck it and see, for want of a better phrase, you know. And you've got to be able to adapt. Just like when we opened day one, I thought, it's going to be honesty box. Straight away, no, it's not. Bang, that plan changed.
So you pivoted quite quickly.
Yeah, bang, that plan changed. No, we're going to be serving coffee and stuff like that. Yeah. I did a lot of, initially in the early days, did a lot of motorcycle maintenance. I've totally gone away from that because it's a pain in the arse.
Right, okay. Yeah.
So I actually like doing it because what I wanted to do is create our own builds. Yeah. Do my own stuff, put my own spin on it, my own little je ne sais quoi. Check me out, being all French there. So my own thing. So people look at it and go, "What? That's an SBROM build." That, you know, Titch has done that, and that's what I want to do, and really create our own bespoke things. So we have done restos before, but majority is custom stuff. And again, arty. At the end of the day, I'm trying to create a piece of artwork. You know.
Well, this is it, isn't it? I mean, it's nice to have that side of you. It kind of keeps you, pardon the language, but sane on the journey. Yeah. So if we just switch that for a second, Titch, and you know, I think that, you know, the elite forces, the military forces, etc., generally there are some dark sides to this as well. There's a lot of servicemen do suffer post-traumatic stress disorder and sort of depression and things like that. I mean, I know that that's something that's close to your heart, and it's something that you're, you know, doing what you can to help.
Yeah.
So if we,
certainly at the shop, but I'm sort of getting more and more involved with several sort of charities, which is great, and I'm more than happy to help out. And we do a bit with the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride and stuff like that. There's a couple of projects going on with there, but I work with a group of people called Future Terrain, which they are the disabled veterans motorsports team. People may remember there was a film done on them a few years ago where they actually raced Dakar. Which was really, really impressive. They are still on the go, and that's getting disabled servicemen and women out there and giving them opportunities to achieve things. And it's been very inspirational. Over the last week, I was away with them, teaching them vehicle driving, recovery, and working with them in order to improve their skill set, because their end game, they want to do this Morocco trip. Which I think is a really good idea. But when you're working with people who are in wheelchairs, so paralysed from the waist down, you know, you've got people with the use of one arm, you've got people minus legs, stuff like that, but still out there wanting to go out and actually do gnarly trips and actually events and stuff like that, and not letting that injury define them. So what? You know, all right, okay, I'm in a wheelchair. How can we make the car work? Can we adapt the car? There are adaptions, etc., to be able to drive a car without the use of your legs, so hand throttles and stuff like that.
It must have been quite interesting over your time in the SBS specifically, if you've seen sort of tragedy for you know, like what were your mates that have you knew that were upstanding, and then all of a sudden they've ended up in a wheelchair or something, whatever. If you've known them, you know, from that life to this life, and then seeing them in this sort of, but there's that sort of, what's coming across again is that sort of the plan A's in there still. Yeah. You know, it's not leaving you, is it? No. You know, irrespective of your disadvantages. Yeah. And, you know, they're trying different things. So.
Yeah, they're just trying to achieve and push on and see what they are capable of. I mean, a fantastic, amazing example is a guy called Toby Guttridge. Toby, ex-SBS guy, shot through the neck, paralysed from the neck down. So Toby's in a wheelchair. He's got a company called Bravery now. And Bravery, Toby used to race bikes. You know, he was out there doing all adrenaline sports, surfing. You know, absolutely brilliant guy. All of a sudden, there's this fit, motivated individual. Bang! That haven't got the use of his body. Literally, his body. He's got the use of his head. That's it. And he's in a chair, obviously with breathing apparatus, etc. But off the back of it, he's had a lot of help, and they've developed and set up Bravery, which is a brilliant company, and he does all adrenaline sports clothing and such like. So he's doing all skater kit. He does motocross kit, all sorts.
I mean, they're lovely stories,
You know,
aren't they? Of how people reinvent themselves from these absolute life-threatening adversities.
Yeah. And lovely guy as well. Lovely guy, and whenever you chat to him, he's always full of it, and you're like, wow, dude, fair play. Yeah, take me after Toby. He's great. Yeah. Also in the shop, we've had people with PTSD. So yeah, quite a big topic. Mental health at the minute. We've had people brought to us through the military charities with mental health issues, with PTSD that we've worked very well, and had one very, very good success story with that. And it works very well in that military environment. And I think I've sort of got my own views on this. I'm by no means trained as a therapist or anything, you know. But I've worked with guys and been in those situations where they've come back with traumatic experience. And I think it helps is that all of a sudden we had a guy in there who was very insular, had gone very into himself, and they were very concerned about him. They brought him into the workshop. We worked with him, and I think being in that group of guys, Billy, for example, who works with us, has only got the use of one arm, which some people find amazing because they're like, really? Yeah. Oh, he races bikes and everything, Billy. So he races bikes off-road. So he raced the Greek Rally the other year with one arm. Just Velcros his arm.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a story.
And I'm sure he won't mind me saying we call it the wet fish is one arm. You know? But I think that's the dark humour that helps.
Yeah.
It's the dark humour that helps, and the fact that there's no sort of quarter given for a disability, whether that be a mental disability or a physical disability, in the fact that if Billy really struggled with the fact that he went to work for another motorcycle shop. They would never let him in the workshop because of his disability, because he only got this one arm. You know, and he obviously you can imagine what that's like. You know, he's trained as a motorcycle mechanic. You know, he's good to go. He's only got this one arm, but I know you can make the cups of tea and that. How out of order is that? He came to me, and I'm like straight away. I'm like, right, okay, I want that doing. All right, mate. And that's what I do. That's what I do with guys. Get in there. Get and do that.
But it comes back to sort of the adversity and the adaptation to overcome the adversity. It comes back to that resilience. Yeah. And I suppose in some respects, you know, what I've gleaned there, Titch, is I've seen the TV programmes. I know we're going to touch on that in a minute, because I believe, you know, it's a classic, you know, the background, the story of your military career is, you know, incredible, and how you've transitioned that, and you've, you know, made this sort of art of, you know, the shop and the bikes and all of these sort of real-time heavy duties that you still carry out in your life. You know, have you ever got a minute to put your feet up? Probably not, actually. Yeah. But, you know, is the best yet to come? You know, I mean, I know that you've been in discussions of late with the BBC. I know that we had the programme out earlier in, I think, this year that was fascinating to watch. It is the best yet to come. Is there a new plan A arriving? Do
you know what? I haven't quite implemented a plan A as yet,
right?
Because this is really, really new, and it's something I wasn't expecting. It wasn't something I was driving towards. There wasn't I was putting together SBOM, and my plan A for SBOM is to push it and see how far I can go. What I'd like to do is end up franchising SBOM. Right. And splitting it into two entities, so cafe bar and workshop side of things. But I'd like to end up franchising. And we'll push on with that one. So that's where my priorities lie with that. However, then all of a sudden up looms TV. Now, I'd never thought about doing TV or anything like that, but the opportunity came my way because, again, here's another big thing and an ethos that I believe in is never say no to anything. If something is offered to you and people are asking you, could you do this? Yeah, we could do that. Why not? And it all stemmed from a little film for what was a little film company who sat at the same time as me, Rolling Rogues, who are now vast and huge Rolling Rogues. They're superb, and they start at the same time as me. Well done, Jax. I mean, he started it, and I was the first film he ever did. But they did this little film on me, and that then went round the bazaars, got shared by this guy, that guy, ended up in the lap of a TV producer who was like, I'm going to message that guy, and he messaged me. And from the back of that, we ended up with did a pilot for a TV show for the BBC, which went out in January. And again, I was asked to do it. Yeah, why not? Yeah, why not? It's outside my comfort zone, because that's by no means, coming from quite a covert, secretive background, doing that sort of thing, and then into the shop, by no means putting myself out there. All of a sudden to go, can you go on telly? Do you know what? It's horrifically outside my comfort zone, but yeah, why not? Let's give it a go. And again, I'll give it the best go I can.
Well, it goes back to that sort of, you don't know yourself till you're your back's against the wall, which you talked about quite early on in this podcast. And I think that just goes to show, for our listeners and viewers today that, have that open mind, open heart, open will to sort of like face some of these challenges and make it happen. And, when your back's against the wall, often the best can come. Yeah. And I think we've been conditioned in Western society to actually just avoid it and take the easy route, which is the plan A. The plan B.
Innit? Yeah.
But it's the plan A, isn't it?
Yeah.
Stick with it, make it happen. And I think we all have that in us to sort of, dig deep and sort of find that sort of tenacity or that energy to sort of make something happen, and making yourself vulnerable. I mean,
that's it. You've got to do that.
Which is what you touched on earlier when we were having a coffee, which was, I might not get it right first time, but with practice, it'll come. Yeah. And I'll get it right. So
exactly. You've got to embrace those opportunities, and if you deny opportunity just through a bit of fear, just because it's outside your comfort and you're not used to that and you've never done it before. Do you know, I'm sort of weirdly, secretly intrigued about doing public speaking. Yeah. As much as I've done, I've spoken to guys at various levels doing presentations and stuff, but it's always been sort of small stuff. I'm intrigued. I know it would be horrific to go out there in front of an audience of people and speak to them. And inside my heart, I'd be pounding and I'd be absolutely crapping my pants. But I think it'd be brilliant to have a go.
Isn't it funny?
Have a go and see
Here
what
we
I
are,
could
guys. We're listening to an SBS veteran, right, that's seen more action that we'll never see, and he's fearful of public speaking.
Yeah.
Come on, it's the classic. It's the number one, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're not frightened of that. You're just going to get your plan A in place.
Well, that's it. Lots of people have said to me, he's like, wow, I see what you're doing on TV and everything, and it's brilliant. But you've got this confidence and stuff, and you can do this. So I'm like, hey, inside, I'm shitting myself at times. Yeah. Absolutely crapping myself. Yeah. When they're asking me to do stuff and that, and I'm like, right, okay.
You'll do it.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Well, listen, and as we come into a sort of a wrap today, it's been an absolute pleasure, Titch. It really has. Your stories are endless. It's amazing. We could talk for 3 weeks. I know we definitely could. I'm already thinking of the series, but it's been an absolute pleasure. And I think for our listeners today, I mean, we're living in some really interesting times where I think we're being taken, a little bit psychologically hostage with our thinking and our limitations in life with, what's happening out there in the big bad world. However, let's not go down that rabbit hole. But I think the message is loud and clear. I think get your plan A in place. Yep. Everything is possible once you start to apply yourself. And on that note, Titch, it's been an absolute delight to actually, you're coming today to share that story, but what an entrepreneur, and you are definitely the soul in business.
Cheers, Paul. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me, mate.